David here with Figboot on Pens, back again with another fountain pen review. Today, I have for you another pen from a brand which was new to me. I've been aware of this brand for a while, but this was the first opportunity I had to get a closer look at one of their models. And it's interesting. There are some things I really like about it, as well as some areas where I feel there could be some improvements. The name of the company is the Good Blue, and the pen which I will be discussing today is their R615 model, especially one which is exclusive to Van Ness pens, which is the green splatter model. What I am going to do today is go over the parts and features of this unique pen. As I mentioned, I'll talk about what I care for and what I don't care for about it. I'll show some measurements, size comparisons, and provide a writing sample with a very interesting flex nib. During the writing sample, I also have a very interesting ink as well. Thanks go out to Van Ness Pens for providing this pen as well as the ink for review. The Good Blue is a company based out of the UK. A number of their R615 models are available through Van Ness. There is one in matte black that looks really sharp. There's another in steel, which has some nice gold-colored accents. And then there is an Ultim model, which is becoming a popular material for fountain pens. But the model I have for you today is an exclusive to Van Ness Pens, like I mentioned. It arrives in this nice metal tin, and inside we have the pen. This is the Good Blue R615 green splatter. The pen is made from an anodized aluminum, and as the name would imply, it features some green splatter on a matte black finish. The splatter does provide an interesting look with small pops of color. There will be some variation in the splatter between the pens here. Here's an example from the Van Ness site. You can see here that some have a bit more splatter than others. The top of the cap is rounded. The barrel then tapers up until around this point where it straightens out. On one side of the pen, there is a flattened portion which extends across the middle of the pen. This serves as a decent roll stop and adds a bit of visual variety to this pen. The cap threads only have a single entry point, so whenever you cap this pen, the facet will align between the cap and barrel. That's the kind of attention to detail I appreciate. The transition from the cap to the barrel is smooth, and the barrel begins with this knurled ring. The barrel then is straight for about an inch before tapering down, and like the top of the cap, the end of the barrel comes to a rounded point. The cap twists off with a single rotation. Now, as I mentioned, this knurling is not part of the cap. It's technically part of the section. When unscrewing the cap, I've learned that it's advisable to grip the pen on that knurling. If you grip the pen on, behind the knurling, there have been times when I've actually unscrewed this section from the barrel rather than removing the cap. It hasn't happened often, but often enough for me to consciously grip the knurling each time to prevent that from potentially happening. Once you have removed the cap, underneath we have this very nice steel flex nib. This nib is also available in a titanium flex, as well as standard nib sizes in extra fine, fine, medium, broad, and zoom. On the nib, it is engraved with "For the Love of Flex." You can see here, this pen was inked up before I took the picture. I kind of like it when the nib creep fills in the engraving on a pen like that. And here's a look at the unique feed. These are polymer feeds. They have a hydrophilic surface which absorbs ink. They start white, but they take on the color of the ink you're using. Now, I neglected to take a picture of this feed before inking this up. Now, some inks will actually stain the feed slightly, so it might not go fully back to white when you clean out the pen. The company states that right up front on their website. I started by inking this up with a very nice turquoise ink from Color Traveler. When I cleaned the pen, you could see it was still a bit blue. Then I inked it up with a red ink. This was Esterbrook Scarlet. After cleaning that out, the feed is now a bit of purple, which is the combination of red and blue. If you consistently change colors, I wonder what the color of the feed will end up taking eventually. Maybe like a light gray? I need to see what happens over time. But here it is with a second blue I inked it up with, and you can see how nicely it looks. Now, this feed does have a very wet exterior, so it's not one that you'll want to touch at all. It's something you need to be a little bit careful with unless you want to end up with some inky fingers. At the end of the section, it has the company name. Wrapping around, it says The Good Blue. I wish the engraving here was a bit crisper and cleaner. You can see here that it's just a little bit spotty. The metal section is slightly concave. This transitions into the very narrow threads and a very large step up to the knurling and the remainder of the barrel. If you look closely here, you can see some very slight twisting grooves on the section. This does a good job of preventing this metal section from being slick. The matte black anodization helps in that regard as well. I do find this large transition from cap to barrel to be a bit cumbersome and in the way. I tend to grip my sections close to the end, and it still is kind of in the way. If you have a grip that is further back on the section, then that ridge might present itself as a larger obstacle. The cap kind of posts if you push it, and you can somewhat get it on there, but it's not secure at all. And then it has some metal-on-metal contact, and over time, I would fear that posting could cause some damage to the barrel. So I would advise to use this pen unposted. This is a cartridge converter pen. It accepts standard international cartridges, and a converter is provided. With the metal construction of this pen, eyedropping would not be advised. As I had mentioned, the Good Blue R615 green splatter is available on the Van S Pens website. I'll put a link to it in the notes below. The R615 models they offer vary in price. On the lower end, there is the steel at $140 and the matte black at $145. And then on the high end, the Ultim is $210. The green splatter here is a little less expensive than the Ultim, retailing for $200. For me, that's on the higher end of the value proposition for this pen. I like the look and feel of this pen. I think the pop of green color is really sharp. I wish the transition from the section to the barrel wasn't so steep. It can be a bit awkward as times, but as you'll see in the writing sample, the flex nib here on this pen is really a pleasure to use, even for someone like myself who is not inclined to use flex nibs on a regular basis. This one has been a lot of fun to test out. Okay, now it is time for some measurements, size comparisons, and that writing sample. So here we have the Good Blue R615 and the green splatter. I just wanted to give you another close-up look at that green splatter. I think that's interesting. And I like this facet right here. In regard to some size comparisons, here it is with another green pen, which is Diplomat Elox, and that's the Matrix. Then here it is with a Narwhal Voyager. And then here it is with a Platinum 3776, and that's the Carnelian Red. In regard to some other pens, here it is with a Sailor Pro Gear, that's the Kanreki. And then here it is with a Pilot Vanishing Point. And finally, here we have a pen that I had reviewed previously, which is from Leonardo, which is in their Pura series. And I can't remember if this is just blue, but I just love this material. I just think it just looks really sharp and pops nicely and has some nice translucency to it. So that's what it looks like in comparison to the Good Blue pen. In regard to uncapped comparisons, here it is with the Diplomat, and here it is with the Sailor Pro Gear, and here it is with the Platinum 3776. So before we do the writing sample, I wanted to give you another close-up look at that nib. You can see it has a unique profile, and see, I wasn't careful and I got some blue on here. See, I got some blue again. So you want to be careful with this feed because it is really drenched in ink. So you want to be careful with that. But you can see the slit on this goes all the way down almost to the bottom, and that's going to give us a decent amount of flex. So what we have is the Good Blue. And I'm not putting too much pressure on here. This is just my kind of my natural handwriting. And we'll say this is a flex. And the ink I'm using is an ink that's also available from Van Ness, and it's from a company that I hadn't tested before, and it's Dominant Industries. And this is Milky Way Blue. This is a really interesting ink. You can see here up close that it is a nice blue, but then it has some purple shading to it, as well as some shimmering and sheening to it as well. So it's kind of a multifaceted ink that looks really nice. In regard to a comparison, this is what it looks like with Diamine's Bloody Brexit, which is a little bit darker, but has some of the same properties. And then here it is with Diamine's Skull and Roses. This is what the bottle looks like. It comes in this little pouch. Inside, it also comes with an eyedropper and this cool kind of teardrop bottle. I do like the way this ink looks on the paper, so I think I'm going to have to be using this more often. Okay, and here we go with the rest of the writing sample. Now, like I mentioned, that's pretty much my standard handwriting, and I like the fact that it gives it a little extra flair. But if you are really into flex writing, you can get a decent line variation out of here. You can get some significant variation. So starting off with no pressure and then getting more, you can see that you could push it quite a bit. In regard to ink flow, I'd say it's on the medium side. In regard to reverse writing, it does a decent job. And then in regard to fast writing, the feed keeps up well. And that's the mark of a good flex nib. In some of my testing with some other flex nibs, they have a tendency to kind of dry out and the feed doesn't keep up. But the feed on this pen has done a very good job. And you know, I don't know if I've seen it railroad even once. And it's been very pleasant. So if you're into flex writing with an interesting looking pen, then this is something you might want to take a look at. So this is the Good Blue, and this is the R615, and the technical name of the pen is the Green Splatter. As I mentioned, it's available from Van Ness Pens, and there'll be a link in the notes below. So until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.